Hello, I'm Roger Baker, Executive Director of the Stratfor Center for Applied Geopolitics at RANE. This podcast is brought to you by RANE Worldview, the premier digital publication for objective geopolitical intelligence and analysis. Find out how RANE can help you stay ahead of global events at ranenetwork.com.
Welcome to RANE's Essential Geopolitics podcast. I'm Emily Donahue. The topic for today's podcast is the state of Al-Shabaab in 2022. Al-Shabaab is a Somalia-based Islamic insurgent group active in East Africa. It's also been responsible for hundreds of violent attacks in the country over the past few years. And now, amid political instability and a worsening drought, the group could be growing. Charles Thorson is here with more on the security risks posed by Al-Shabaab. Charles, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Emily.
Can you tell me a little bit about the group's evolution in recent years?
Sure. Al-Shabaab has continued to be active across Somalia in recent years. They've particularly been effective in targeting high-ranking politicians and other key leaders throughout Somalia. Recently, they were responsible for an attack at a hotel in Mogadishu less than 2 weeks ago that was targeting senior political and security leaders in Somalia. More recently, they've also been active in Ethiopia to a limited degree, conducting cross-border attacks. So they've been increasingly active, taking advantage of the worsening economic conditions in Somalia, particularly a worsening drought, to really increase their activities and to conduct more aggressive attacks, more coordinated and more spectacular attacks.
So more coordinated and more spectacular attacks. Talk to me about the factors in Somalia that may have helped the group survive or even grow.
Sure. Most recently, we've had issues of drought that has affected large parts of Somalia, where the government can't adequately provide adequate water. There's also been food insecurity stemming from the war in Ukraine. Over the course of the last year, there's been political instability in Somalia, particularly indecision about the presidency and how the outcome of elections, basically uncertainty over how elections would play out and the conduct of elections. So all of those factors have kind of contributed to creating an environment where Al-Shabaab can really thrive.
Charles, talk about the threat it poses outside of Somalia. Does it in any way pose threats outside of Somalia?
At the present time, the threat of Al-Shabaab attacks outside of Somalia is fairly limited. They've conducted cross-border attacks into Ethiopia recently as late July. But they were of a limited scale, and they appear to have been at least somewhat retaliatory rather than being a deliberate attempt at expansion. But it appears at least Al-Shabaab does continue to have regional aspirations as far as, certainly into Ethiopia, they would probably want to conduct further attacks into ethnic Somali areas of Ethiopia. And then in Kenya, we also see frequent attacks in border areas near the Somali-Kenyan border. So they certainly maintain the ability to strike outside of Somalia.
Well, I imagine that concerns the countries neighboring Somalia. Can you describe to me what are some signs worth watching that could indicate the threat from Al-Shabaab is increasing?
Yeah, some key signs about that would indicate the threat from Al-Shabaab is increasing. One of them includes its future role in Al-Qaeda. So Al-Qaeda recently had a leadership loss. Their leader, Ayman al-Zawahiri, was killed in Afghanistan. And according to UN reporting, Al-Shabaab's leader is in the line of succession to become head of Al-Qaeda. Although he's further down on the list, if he were to be chosen, it could be an indicator that Al-Shabaab is looking at further external operations. Other indications would be if they successfully form a successful base of operations in Ethiopia, that would indicate that they're being more expansive in their operations. With Kenya, they've increased their rhetoric in recent days against the Kenyan government, and so that certainly indicates that they at least want to attack Kenya, although it's unclear if they have the capability to do so at this point.
So what are you advising clients right now?
Biggest thing I'm advising is obviously monitor the situation closely. Really heed warnings about potential attacks in the surrounding countries. The embassies are very forthcoming about such warnings. Additionally, just helping them monitor the situation in Somalia as the situation either deteriorates or continues on its present path. That would also be an indicator to look for as far as potential for al-Shabaab to conduct attacks externally.
Charles Thorson is a global security analyst with RANE. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Emily.
You can keep up with security threats with RANE's Threat Lens, which delivers strategic and tactical intelligence for global organizations. Find out more about RANE Risk Intelligence and RANE Threat Lens at ranenetwork.com. That's RANE network.com. I'm Emily Donahue, and thank you for listening.